Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of the House of Commons, and in this episode I wanted to discuss the hardware that I use for shooting photos and video, and talk about some of the different pieces that I have here and things that I carry in my backpack with me when I go out shooting photos and video. And so I've got pretty much everything spread out here on the table, all the hardware and a glass of Pinot. Always good to have a glass of Pinot. Keeps the throat clear. So anyway, let's dive into it. When I first started out getting into digital photography, the first DSLR camera that I bought was a Sony A230, which is an entry-level Sony camera. And the reason I went with Sony versus getting a Nikon or a Canon was just more bang for the buck, basically. The price was right and the features were there. I'd done a little research, and that's what seemed the best fit for me. So, and the Sony A230 was a great camera to learn on. Learned about ISO, learned about aperture, learned about shutter speed, and how all three of those work together to make the photo that you're looking for. Now, when I decided to go professional and start making some money from photography, I bumped up to the Sony A77, and again, researched it, and it just had the most bang for the buck as far as I was concerned. And great features, takes 24 megapixel photos and 1080p video in either your standard 24 frames per second or 60 frames per second if you want to do some kind of slow motion stuff with your video. 60 frames per second is perfect for that, because then you can slow it down to 24 and it looks awesome. And so I've been very happy with it. It's been very great. And normally this is what I would shoot the House of Commons videos with, but since I'm going to be showing it to you today, I'm shooting with my iPhone. I'm sitting on a tripod. So, all right, so let's talk about the camera first. As I told you already, 24 megapixels, great for video. Has all the features that I could want from a DSLR camera that you would want to be shooting professional photos with. All your standard settings: shutter priority, aperture priority, manual, which is what I use normally, and the body feels great. It's not too heavy. I can carry this around pretty much all day long and not worry about it. Well, depending on the lens that's on there, of course, too. So the viewfinder on this is an electronic viewfinder, which means when you put your eye up to it, as you adjust, say, shutter speed, if it's going to make the picture darker, you see it getting darker in the viewfinder, which is a great feature to have on there for getting those quick shots. Especially, you can see if it's too dark, slide over, boom, take a shot. Good. The LCD screen on here is pretty big. It does a great job of showing you a preview of what your photo is going to look like, and you can just zoom in as well to see those photos. And it does great on batteries. Does great on storage space too. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. So anyway, that's why I bumped up to the Sonys and stayed with Sony, and I'll probably always shoot Sony going forward. So some other things to have here. Let's talk about the lenses first. We'll talk about that. The lens that's on here, on the camera right now, is a 50 millimeter 1.8 lens. Now 1.8 refers to the aperture or the size. A lot of times you'll hear the professionals refer to it as fast glass. What that means is you can get your aperture open really wide in that camera and let in a lot of light on that lens. I mean, let in a lot of light. So it's great for low light conditions and or studio lighting conditions, things like that. And it's 50 millimeter fixed. It's what they call 50 millimeter prime. There's no zoom on it. You're at 50 millimeters. That's it. Good lens to learn on too, because it makes you move around to get the shots that you're looking for. That not only keeps you active, but lets you kind of be a little more creative with your shots too, which is cool. So with the Sony A230, when I bought that camera, it came with a kit lens, and this is it here. This is a 18 to 55 millimeter zoom, and Not the fastest glass on here. It's a 3.5 aperture at the smallest, or largest, I should say. And but it was great to learn on. 18 millimeter gives you, I'm not going to say wide angle, but it gives you a pretty wide shot. And then 55 millimeter lit is great again for 50-55 to shoot portraiture with, street photography, things like that. So it's a good lens for having that, for doing those kind of shots. And great lens to learn on, definitely. So when I bumped up to the A77, I bought the 50 millimeter, but I also bought an 85 millimeter lens, and again, perfect for portraiture. Lets you get in a little closer for those kind of headshots, shoulder headshot type shots. And the aperture on this is 2.8, so it does decent in low light. And street photography, again, good for that kind of stuff. And just all around another good lens. It's, again, another prime lens, so it's fixed at 85 millimeters, so you have to move around to get the shots that you're looking for. But again, it lets you be a little more creative than you would be probably with a zoom lens. Now this one here is a 55 to 200 millimeter zoom, and the reason I bought this lens was for sports photography. My son at the time was in flag football, and I wanted to be able to zoom in and get those close-up action shots without having to actually walk on the field, so I could sit on the sidelines and get some pretty decent shots. And this lens allowed me to do that. Now it's not the fastest lens. It's a 4 to 5.6 aperture on this, but most of the games that you're shooting, or if you're out there doing sports photography, most of that's going to be done during the day anyway, so there's plenty of light around, and I didn't really have to worry about that. And it let me get in and get some pretty cool shots of the action that was going on the field. This next lens here is and by the way, those were all Sony lenses, made by Sony for the Alpha cameras. Now, the last two I've got here are made by a company called Tamron, and the reason, again, I went with Tamron, bang for the buck. Price was good on these, and quality is really good on these things. And so this is a 28 to 75 millimeter lens. Now, the reason I bought this was when I decided to start shooting live bands and concert footage. Not that I've shot any concert footage really. A lot of times you can't bring a DSLR into a professional concert setting, but live bands and local bands in local bars, beautiful lens for that. It's a 2.8 aperture on this, so it does pretty well in low light conditions, which in the bars normally the lighting's not the greatest. And then as far as the zoom on this, 28 millimeter, great for getting a nice shot of the entire stage, the entire band playing together, and then zooms into 75 for those shots where you want to get the guitar player's fingers on the fretboard, or the expression of the drummer's face while he's back there bashing on the drums. Beautiful lens for that. Now the last lens here is a 70 to 300 millimeter lens, again made by Tamron. Not the fastest. This has got 4 to 5.6 aperture on this, depending on the zoom that you're at. But perfect for nature photography. 300 millimeter, you could be a good distance away from pretty much any animal that you're trying to shoot without spooking them, and get a good photo of them, get a good close-up photo of them actually. And since most of that kind of photography that you're doing, the wildlife stuff's gonna be done during the day, the 4 to 5.6 aperture is really not that big of an issue. There's plenty of light around, so good for wildlife photography. All right, so those are the lenses. Let's talk about the extra camera body here, what they call the vertical battery grip. Now, what this does is mounts onto the bottom. This part here actually slides into the battery compartment and screws onto the bottom of the camera like that, and gives it a bit of a beefier look. Makes it look a little more professional, I guess. But it allows you to take the camera, tilt it, and have your shutter release right there instead of having to reach around for the one that's on the camera. So now you've got one right here, and you still have all your other controls here. your autofocus controls, your function button, things like that. And so it has all the controls on that side there for doing those shots. And you still have your shutter speed control, your aperture control back here. So a good thing to have. Plus it lets you have 2 batteries in the camera. So when the first battery runs out, it'll automatically switch over to the second one, and you've got 0 downtime if you're shooting a lot. Good accessory to have. This is what they call a TTL flash, off-camera flash too. If you have an adapter that slides onto the hot shoe, you can slide it onto this, so you can hold this kind of flash around. The cool thing with this flash is, even if you leave it mounted on the camera, normally if you're shooting like, group of friends, group of people and all that, you wouldn't necessarily point this directly at them for the flash. And the reason for that is it'll kind of wash out the skin tones. It's just not gonna look good at all if you point it directly at them. But this allows you to tilt the flash and rotate it. So if you're shooting indoors and you've got a nice white ceiling above you, and you've got a group of people standing there, you can aim that flash up the ceiling, pop it off, and the whole entire ceiling will act like a softbox and give you a nice soft lighting on your subjects. Or if you shoot over towards a white wall, somebody standing here in front of you, but you angle the flash that way, you can get some cool soft lighting effects on one side, shadow on the other kind of things. So angle it off, pop it, boom, cool photos. Batteries. Always have extra batteries with you. I've got 4 of these for the Sony A77. 3 made by Sony, 1 third-party battery, but it works just as well as the others do. So always good to have in the bag with you. SD cards. Pretty much anytime you see these things go on sale, grab them. If you can afford it, definitely grab a bunch. You can never have enough of these. And this is this is the storage. This is where the camera saves the photos to or videos to. And so I've got a few 64 gigs here, some 32 gigs. But every once in a while, places like Staples, even Walgreens, will have these things go on sale. And just go snatch them a bunch. Even if you can, grab a bunch of 16 gigs. If you're out shooting, a lot of times you're gonna shoot. Say you're on a nature hike and you're shooting, photos during your nature hike. You may shoot 500 to 1,000 photos, and that's the beauty of it, is you can shoot that many photos. You may only use 100 of them, but the more storage you have, the more opportunity you have to get cool shots, or get that cool shot that you're looking for. And let's see here. Remote. This is good for when you have the camera on a tripod. You need to get that super steady shot. You're doing some night photography of the shooting the moon, or portrait photography, or if you're doing like HDR type photography where you're going to take 3 shots in a row. You definitely want to have the camera mounted on a tripod, and you don't want to have to push the button, which is going to move the camera, push the shutter release. This allows you to stand off the camera, hit the button, and it'll take the photos. And you never touch the camera. You get a nice, clear, steady shot. So always good to find a remote for whatever DSLR camera you have. And again, doesn't have to be from the manufacturer. This is third party. Cleaning pen. I always carry one of these in the bag with me. You never know when you're going to get something on the lens, or it might be drizzling that day and you might get a little spots on the lens or whatever. One side of this pen has and this is what they call a lens pen. It's got a little carbon tip on here that you just rub on the lens and gets rid of all the smears and blemishes on the lens. And then on the other side, it's got a little slide out brush, great for getting dust and dirt off your camera or off the lens too. So always good to have one of those in the bag with you. Let's see here. This is business cards. Not a bad idea to have with you, especially if you run into a situation where you're out taking photos and somebody asks, if you're for hire, or if you know, somebody asks what you're doing there or why you're there taking photos, you can hand them a business card and then, you know, make up some story about why you're there. In fact, I had an incident like that once where I was in a bar taking photos of a band, and somebody came up and asked me, you know, who I was working for, why I was there, and pulled out a business card, handed it to her, said, boom, the band hired me to take photos of them. In that case, the story was true, but, you know, even if it wasn't true, I would have said the same thing, probably. So, alright, so the rest of the stuff that's sitting around here is a combination of stuff that deals with both photography and video, mostly, but, you know, more has to do with the video side of stuff. But let's look at, well, the lighting rig here. Again, probably not the best for taking, you know, using for lighting up a subject that you're going to take a photo of. But if you're recording video with your camera and, you know, you're doing a quick interview with somebody, or you know, shooting a family gathering or whatever, this is great for doing for lighting up the subjects when the lighting's not the best. And it's got 160 LEDs in it. It's made by a company called Neewar. It's the CN160, and I'll show you right now. It gets pretty bright. Now, it's not the most flattering light, but you can fix that. You know, if you're shooting video, you can fix that in post afterwards. Cool thing about this one was, though, it actually uses the rechargeable battery for that came with the A230, the Sony A230 camera, so I can use the battery from that in this particular lighting rig. So, cool feature there. Here's the Rode video mic, and it's called the Rode Video Mic Pro, a company called Rode out of Australia. Make great mics, and this has the ability to have a low pass filter turned on it, which cuts off a lot of the rumbling. But it also has a 10 dB cut. If your subject's nice and close to you, you don't need to have so much gain coming into the mic. You can turn on the 10 dB cut and get a nice level volume out of it. Or if the subject's far away, you can turn on the 20 dB boost and pick somebody up from a pretty good distance anyway. And so it's great for that. Now, normally, if you're shooting video, you're going to have a boom mic or a professional mic going on, so you're mostly going to use this for reference audio, so that you can sync up the audio from your good mic to the audio that came off the camera later. But in a quick instance where you're just doing a quick interview with somebody, or like I said, it's just doing a little family gathering, perfect for that. Now, that also came with what they call a dead cat, and it's just a wind filter is all it is. Slips over the boom mic. That's also a condenser mic, so you need to put a battery in there. It's a 9-volt battery that takes, but that's why you get some excellent audio out of that too. So good for that. And let's see, tripods. Again, this is a SACAR tripod. Nothing super fancy. It does the job. It holds the camera steady. That's all I needed to do. I've never had an instance where it has not been able to, you know, stand up in, you know, some kind of windy day or things like that. It's always held the camera nice and tight for me, and it's nothing fancy, you know. It's just got your standard head on it. You can swivel the camera around, get the shots I need. Probably not the best for video, which is why I have the tripod that the iPhone is sitting on right now, which has got a ball head on it, which just gives you a little more smoother pan and tilt actions than this particular camera would, or tripod would, I should say. Now, the thing with tripods is, if you're shooting in public areas, like a park or downtown on the streets, or even sometimes on a nature hike, if you're shooting on a public trail, a lot of times to set up a tripod, you're going to need a permit, or you should have a permit. And if you get caught without one, not sure what the penalty is, but I don't really want to find out. So what I did was I invested in a monopod, and this is it's made by a company called Benro, and it's got 3 fold-out little legs here. You can actually step on one as you're, stand on one as you're holding this thing up. It does extend up quite a ways. It's got a little plate that mounts to the bottom of the camera so you can slide the camera on and off of it. But don't need a permit to set up a monopod, which is, I guess, the loophole. So if you're going to be someplace, again, downtown on the city streets, and you want to get some cool video shots, this has got a nice ball head on it. Allows you to get some nice smooth shots. You can adjust the tension on it, those kind of shots. It's got a nice ball on the base of it, so you can rotate it around and get smooth shots with it. But again, loophole. Any place you can't take a tripod, or if you're if it's questionable whether you can take a tripod or not, get a monopod, and then you don't have to worry about it. Let's see here. Last thing. This is, and mostly for cinematic effects. This is for video mostly. I don't really see any reason I would use this for photography, except maybe some kind of time lapse, maybe. But this is what they call a camera slider. So I bought this and the ball head here separately, and they were probably about $40 each, maybe. Again, nothing too fancy, nothing too expensive. What this allows you to do is you mount the ball head on here, you mount the camera to the ball head, and it allows you to get those nice slide panning shots. Again, cinematic effects, when you're shooting video, you can slide that way. You can mount this on 2 different tripods. One tripod here, one tripod here. It's got universal screws here, and you can do a angled shot like that. Nice angled kind of panning shot. Or you can set it this way, face the camera that way, and do a nice kind of smooth zoom in kind of shot. So mostly just a toy to have for those cinematic effects. But if you're getting serious into movie making with your DSLR camera, you definitely want to get a slider. Get those Hollywood effects. So that's it. That's about it. I do carry a flashlight around in my bag with me too, for those instances where you're, say again, in a bar recording a band and the lighting's not that great and it's dark, but you want to see into your bag to grab another lens or grab another SD card. Always have a little LED flashlight with you to be able to see what you're doing in your bag there. And that's it. That's the hardware. Next, what we're going to talk about is how I use Lightroom and Photoshop together. And Lightroom, how I use it for not only organizing my photos, but it does all the post-production work for me. Do all of my white balance and color grading, color saturation, developing the raw photos that come out of the A77, and then I'll talk about what they call doing the round trip between Lightroom and Photoshop, which is processing the photo in Lightroom, getting it the way getting it the way to look the way you want it to look, and then if you want to add effects, frames, things like that to the photos, whatever you want to do to it outside of Lightroom, I'll show you how I take it from Lightroom into Photoshop, work on it, and then back into Lightroom, and then I do all of, if I'm going to do any printing or exporting for the web, all of that happens in Lightroom. So we'll talk about that in the next episode, and then after that we'll get into a deeper dive regarding the filters and plugins and things like that I use in Photoshop to get some of the effects that you've probably seen on some of the photos that I have out on Facebook or our Zenfolio site. So, all right, hope that's helpful. And if you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to ask the comment section below on YouTube here. Ask your questions there if you want to. Ask your questions. You can send us an email at btsp@cox.net. You can look us up on our Facebook page, the House of Commons, and we also have a blog, houseofcommons.blogspot.com. And any one of those arenas that you want to ask us questions in or leave comments on, we're happy to hear what comments you have, and happy to answer your questions as quick as we can. So that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed that episode. Thanks for watching. Y'all have a great day.